The Tides of Time and Chronicles of the Forgotten War. I want to remind us why we're doing this. This isn't just a project or some academic exercise. It's our last chance to reclaim what was lost. Robert nodded, his voice tinged with bitterness. Lost because of a war none of us lived to see. The Confederacy shouldn't have won, but they. Chapter 2. The Four Mines. The hidden workshop beneath the ruins of Columbia University was both a sanctuary and a testament to rebellion. Flickering LED lights illuminated the dimly lit space, casting long shadows on the walls cluttered with blueprints, scribbled equations, and maps. In the center stood the time machine, a crude yet intricate creation of polished metal and wires, a symbol of hope forged in the depths of tyranny. Khalid Saif was already seated at the circular workstation when Robert William entered, his coat damp from the evening drizzle. Akash Kumar and James Oliver followed closely behind, their faces grim but determined. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the prototype, its energy core pulsing like a heartbeat. "We're all here," Khalid said, breaking the silence. "Let's begin." Shared convictions. Each of them carried the weight of a world that had forgotten freedom. As Khalid opened the meeting, the others settled into their seats, the air heavy with unspoken tension. "Before we talk about progress," Khalid began, "I want to remind us why we're doing this. This isn't just a project or some academic exercise. It's our last chance to reclaim what was lost." Robert nodded, his voice tinged with bitterness. "Lost because of a war none of us lived to see. The Confederacy shouldn't have won, but they did. And now the whole world pays the price." Akash adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "I don't need reminding. My parents paid that price with their lives. Intellectual deviation? What a ridiculous charge. They weren't deviants, they were thinkers." James sighed, his usual light-hearted demeanor absent. "We've all lost someone. Family, friends, entire communities. But sitting here mourning won't fix anything. What matters is what we do next." Khalid gestured toward the prototype. "That's what we'll fix. We're on the brink of something that could rewrite history itself. The question is, are we ready?" The project's origins. The four had met years earlier during a regime-mandated scientific convention in Washington, D.C. It was rare for intellectuals from different fields to cross paths, but the regime had sought to consolidate its best minds for its own purposes. Khalid, an expert in engineering, had been tasked with developing advanced surveillance systems. Robert's expertise in bioengineering was exploited for genetic modification programs. Akash, a physicist, was forced to work on energy weaponry, while James was assigned to refine the algorithms governing the watches. What the regime didn't anticipate was the bond that would form among these four unlikely allies. In secret, they began exchanging ideas, each one revealing a growing disdain for the oppressive system. Their collaboration started as an academic curiosity, a shared interest in temporal physics. But as the regime's grip tightened, their work evolved into a rebellion. A shared vision. "We've come so far," Akash said, glancing at the prototype. "When we started this project, it was theoretical. A way to distract ourselves from the horrors outside. But now, we're standing on the edge of possibility." James smirked, though his voice carried an edge of seriousness. "Possibility. Let's call it what it is, insanity. We're trying to manipulate time. That's not just bending the rules of physics, it's tearing them apart." "And do you regret it?" Khalid asked. James shook his head. "Not for a second." Robert leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about the risks. Not just the physical ones, implosion, temporal paradoxes, but the moral ones. Are we playing gods here? Is it right to meddle with the past?" Khalid met his gaze, his voice steady. "What's happening now isn't right. The world as it is, it's a nightmare. If we have the chance to change it, don't we have an obligation to try?" Akash nodded. "The regime rewrote history to suit their narrative. Why shouldn't we rewrite it to restore the truth?" Mapping the mission. The conversation shifted to logistics. A holographic map of the United States in 1863 hovered above the table, displaying key locations from the Civil War. "We need to focus on pivotal moments," Khalid said, pointing to the map. "Gettysburg, Vicksburg, and the Confederate strategy in the Mississippi Theater. If we can nudge the Union toward victory in these battles, it could turn the tide of the war." Robert frowned. "But we can't be too obvious. If we leave a trail, the Confederacy, or the Union, might suspect something's off." "That's why we work in the shadows," Akash said. "We don't need to win the war ourselves. We just need to give the Union the tools and information they need. James tapped a button on his wrist console, pulling up a schematic of the time machine. The prototype can take us back, but we need to be precise. We're not just traveling to a specific year, we're targeting specific events. One misstep and we could end up in the wrong place, or worse, the wrong timeline. Hope and fear. As the discussion continued, doubts began to surface. What if it doesn't work? Robert asked, voicing the fear they all shared. What if we go back and nothing changes? Then at least we'll know we tried, Khalid said. But I believe it will work. It has to. Akash glanced at the time machine, its sleek surface reflecting the dim light. If we succeed, we're not just changing history. We're giving the world a second chance. Imagine a world where the Confederacy didn't win. Where democracy didn't die. James chuckled softly. I'd settle for a world without watches. Or drones. Or propaganda at every corner. The group fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The weight of their mission was immense, and the risks were staggering. But so was the potential reward. The regime's shadow. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden beep from James's console. He frowned and tapped the screen. What is it? Khalid asked. Surveillance update, James said, his voice tense. The Watchers have increased the patrols in this area. I think they're getting suspicious. Akash cursed under his breath. How much time do we have? Hard to say, James replied. But we need to be careful. One slip, and this whole operation is over. Khalid stood, his jaw set. Then we move quickly. The machine is almost ready. We make final preparations tonight and leave tomorrow. A last conversation. As the meeting wrapped up, the group lingered, reluctant to leave. There was a sense that this might be their last night together in the present timeline. What do you think it'll be like? Robert asked, breaking the silence. The past, Akash replied. Chaotic, dangerous, but also hopeful. They were fighting for something real, something worth dying for. And us, James added. If we succeed, what happens to us? Khalid looked at the group, his expression somber. We might not exist in the new timeline. Or we might find ourselves in a completely different world. But whatever happens, it'll be better than this. The others nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. They were willing to risk everything, not just their lives, but the very existence, for a chance to create a better world. Closing the night. As they prepared to leave, Khalid placed a hand on the time machine, his thoughts a mix of fear and determination. Tomorrow, he said softly, we change everything. The others joined him, their expressions mirroring his resolve. Tomorrow, they echoed. And with that, the four minds departed into the night, each carrying the hope of a freer world and the burden of the impossible mission that lay ahead. If you like this story, then please like the video and subscribe the channel. Soon we will upload next chapter.